Hello everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. And today, let's listen to a story. A story where love, betrayal, and power collide in the most unexpected way. Seraphina Vale wasn't supposed to be home that night, after a full month away on a high-stakes business trip. She arrived earlier than planned, exhausted, jet-lagged, but eager to surprise her husband. She imagined Lucian Kingswell opening the door, shocked and delighted, pulling her into an embrace. She imagined laughter, warmth, maybe even a quiet dinner together. Instead, she walked straight into a celebration she was never meant to see. The Kingswell mansion glowed with chandeliers, champagne, and 100 whispers floating under orchestral music. But what struck her the most wasn't the crowd. It was the massive white gold banner hanging proudly across the hall. "Welcome the first heir of the Kingswell dynasty." Her steps froze. At the center of the room stood Maribel Drexton, radiant in a silk gown, her hands gently resting on her visibly pregnant belly. And beside her, Lucian, smiling, one hand placed protectively over Maribel's stomach as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Conversations hushed. Genevieve Kingswell, elegant in her cruelty, lifted a glass of champagne and announced loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Everyone, meet the true mother of our grandchild." The words sliced through Seraphina like ice. A few guests glanced at her with pity, others with satisfaction. She opened her mouth to speak, but Genevieve stepped forward, eyes filled with disdain. "Seraphina, this is no longer your home. Please leave before you embarrass yourself." Lucian didn't defend her. Maribel didn't look away. And for a moment, Seraphina felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She stood there, surrounded by people she once called family, yet suddenly treated like an unwelcome stranger. This was the moment everything shattered, the moment her entire life split in two. And before the truth is revealed, we must go back to where it all began. What happened that night, the celebration, the betrayal, the humiliation, did not come out of nowhere. To understand how everything fell apart, we must return to the world Seraphina Vale lived in. Long before the moment her life was shattered in front of 100 watching eyes, Seraphina Vale wasn't just wealthy. She was born into a legacy that carried weight in every major city across the country. At 27, she was the daughter of billionaire Alexander Vale, a man whose investments shaped industries and built empires. But Seraphina had carved her own path, refusing to be just another heiress protected by her father's shadow. She chose the battlefield of the culinary world, a realm where innovation met pressure, and failure could burn an entire brand to the ground. And she thrived in it. Under her leadership, Vale Group's restaurant division was booming. Michelin star partnerships, luxury dining concepts, global expansions, her signature was on them all. The board praised her vision, investors trusted her instincts. And her father, a man not easily impressed, called her the future of the Vale Empire. But every triumph came at a cost: time, energy, commitment, and motherhood was something she couldn't fit into the equation, not yet. Her decision was thoughtful, calculated, responsible. But to the Kingswell family, it was unforgivable. Lucian Kingswell, her husband of 2 years, was a man who could have been strong, if he hadn't been taught to bend. At 28, he served as the chief financial officer at one of Vale Group's luxury hotels. He adored Seraphina, admired her brilliance, and depended on her more than he ever admitted aloud. But Lucian also misunderstood her. He believed the Vale fortune began and ended with hotels. He had no idea the family owned stakes in technology, real estate, maritime logistics, private aviation, and more. Seraphina never bragged, never boasted, never reminded him of the power she came from. She wanted a marriage, not a hierarchy, and in his ignorance, he underestimated her in the most dangerous way. Genevieve Kingswell, Lucian's mother, saw the world through a lens sharpened by jealousy and fear. To her, Seraphina wasn't a partner, she was a threat. A threat to control, to tradition, to the idea that her son needed a proper wife who understood her role. Every time Seraphina entered a room, Genevieve felt overshadowed. Every polite smile from her daughter-in-law felt like superiority. Every accomplishment meant Lucian would drift further from her grasp, but nothing fueled her resentment more than Seraphina's refusal to have a child. "You young women think careers give you meaning," she once said, her tone sweet but barbed. "But a family, that is what lasts." Seraphina simply answered, steady and calm, "I want children when I can truly be present for them." Genevieve's smile never reached her eyes after that, and so the air in the Kingswell household thickened. Conversations turned brittle. Silences grew heavier, like hairline cracks forming in glass, invisible at first, then spreading, deepening, threatening to break everything in one final, devastating shatter. They didn't know it yet, but betrayal had already begun. What Genevieve Kingswell felt for her daughter-in-law wasn't simple dislike. It was something colder, sharper. A resentment carved over time, each layer built from insecurity. jealousy, and the fear that Seraphina Vale was everything she could never be. And now, as tension quietly thickened inside the Kingswell home, that resentment began hardening into something dangerous. Genevieve had always believed that Lucien deserved more than the life he was settling for. In her eyes, Seraphina's ambition wasn't admirable, it was arrogance. Her wealth wasn't impressive, it was a threat. And her refusal to have a child? Unforgivable. One evening, after a family dinner had dissolved into uncomfortable silence, Genevieve watched Lucien retreat to his office. His shoulders were tense, his expression weary. That was when she approached him, quietly, almost tenderly. "Lucien," she said, closing the door behind her. "I'm worried about you, sweetheart." Lucien didn't look up. "I'm fine, mother." "Are you?" Her voice softened, but her eyes were sharp. "You're married to a woman who refuses to give you a family. Who prioritizes business over you. Over your future." He exhaled, long and tired. "Seraphina just needs time. She's building something important." Genevieve stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Don't you see? This isn't about timing. This is who she is. And it's who she'll always be." He finally looked up, uneasy. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying," she said carefully, "that you've tied your life to a woman who doesn't care if you become irrelevant." Lucien flinched. "That's not true." But the seed was planted over the following weeks. Genevieve's words became more deliberate, more calculated. She began to present the idea gently, at first like a worry, then like a possibility, and eventually like a necessity. "Lucien, you need security. Your marriage should protect you, not bind you. She controls everything. Your home, your finances, your future." And then, one night, she revealed the heart of her intention. "You should be the one holding power, Lucien. Not her." Lucien stiffened. "What does that even mean?" Genevieve sat across from him, hands folded elegantly like a seasoned negotiator. "It means you need to think about your position. If Seraphina truly loved you, she'd ensure your future. She'd share her assets, her influence, her stake in Vale Group." Lucien swallowed hard. She trusts me. She would give me anything if I asked." "Exactly," Genevieve whispered. "And that's why you should ask." He stared at her, horrified. "Are you telling me to take her company?" "I'm telling you," she said slowly, "to protect yourself. To make sure you're not left with nothing when her world no longer needs you." Once Lucien didn't immediately reject the idea. Genevieve pushed further. Her plan was simple on the surface, but ruthless underneath. Step 1. Trick Seraphina into signing a set of documents disguised as routine financial transfers. They would quietly shift part of her shares and assets into Lucien's name. Step 2. Once Lucien legally held ownership, the remaining transfers could be completed under the guise of consolidation. Step 3. Secure Lucien's position permanently by ensuring he had an heir. Something Genevieve reminded him of constantly. "Once you have a child," she said, "no one can challenge your place in the Vale Empire." Lucien buried his face in his hands. "Mother, stop. This is wrong. I won't betray her like that." Genevieve's expression hardened. "You already are betraying yourself by allowing her to control everything. A man needs to lead his home. A man needs to protect his bloodline." He shook his head. "Seraphina isn't the enemy." She leaned forward. "But she's not on your side either." Lucien loved his wife. Loved her in a way that terrified him sometimes, because Seraphina's strength made him feel both safe and inadequate. He respected her decision not to have a child yet. He told himself he understood, but late at night, when the house was quiet and Genevieve's voice still echoed in his mind, doubts began to take shape. Would Seraphina ever choose him over her empire? Would he ever truly be more than an ornament in her world? And slowly, painfully, Genevieve's poison took root, not enough to corrupt him entirely, but enough to weaken him, enough to make him vulnerable when the real trap was finally set. The poison had settled, but the transformation Genevieve hoped for in her son had not happened. Lucien was conflicted, vulnerable, confused, but not yet willing to betray Seraphina on his own. Genevieve realized one thing: if Lucien wouldn't cross the line himself, she would drag him across it, and fate handed her the perfect opportunity. One crisp Monday morning, Seraphina packed her suitcase for a 1-month business trip, a major expansion deal in San Francisco that required her personal oversight. She kissed Lucien goodbye at the door, her hand lingering on his cheek. "I'll be back before you know it," she said with that gentle confidence he adored. Lucien held her hand a second longer than usual. "Stay safe. Call me when you land." She smiled. "Always." When her car disappeared down the street, a silence fell over the house. A silence Genevieve embraced like an open invitation. "She's gone," she whispered to herself. "Now we begin." Maribel Drexton was everything Genevieve needed in an accomplice: young, stunning, ambitious, and hungry for a chance to climb out of the life she was born into. As a front desk associate at the Kingswell Hotel, Maribel had crossed paths with Lucien many times. She admired him, perhaps too much, and Lucien, ever polite, always smiled back. That was all Genevieve needed. Within days of Seraphina's departure, Genevieve summoned Maribel to the Kingswell home. "My dear," she said sweetly, "I have a special opportunity for you." Maribel listened carefully, curiosity flickering in her eyes as Genevieve laid out the script. Flattery, seduction, vulnerability, and most importantly, timing. Maribel didn't hesitate. "I'll do whatever you need, Mrs. Kingswell." Genevieve smiled, satisfied. "I knew I chose the right girl." Genevieve made sure every detail was perfect. She handed Maribel several of Seraphina's old silk nightgowns, items Genevieve had secretly removed from the closet months earlier. "Wear these," she instructed. "He knows the texture. He'll recognize the silhouette in the dark." She gave Maribel the exact perfume Seraphina used, the elegant scent Lucien always associated with his wife. The plan was simple: create an illusion familiar enough that Lucien wouldn't question it through the fog of alcohol and longing. For weeks, Genevieve invited Maribel over while Lucien was still at work. They rehearsed the scene, the lighting, the gestures. Maribel learned to mimic the way Seraphina walked. The way she turned her head slightly when she laughed. It was manipulation, performed like a masterpiece. It happened on a Friday. Lucien's coworkers insisted on celebrating a major financial milestone. He resisted at first, but eventually allowed himself to join. One drink turned into 3, then 6, and when he finally called it a night, the world around him spun softly like a dizzy carousel. He stumbled into a rideshare, pressed his forehead against the window, and whispered, "Sarah? Wish you were home." When he reached the Kingswell mansion, lights were dimmed, warm, soft, familiar. Too familiar. He pushed open the front door, and then he smelled it. Her perfume. Seraphina's perfume. "Sarah?" he called out, breathless. No answer, but a silhouette moved at the end of the hallway, soft curves draped in a silk nightgown he knew all too well. She stood half-turned, letting the dim light outline her figure. Lucien's heart dropped and soared all at once. "She came home early." He approached, drunk, relieved, emotional. "Seraphina? You're here." Maribel didn't speak. "Just let him come closer." She placed a finger on his chest, light, suggestive, practiced. Lucien exhaled shakily. And in his clouded, vulnerable state, he let himself fall into the illusion Genevieve had so carefully crafted. The night unfolded exactly as planned. When sunlight streamed through the window, Lucien turned over, and froze. The woman beside him was not Seraphina. Maribel smiled sleepily, as if nothing were wrong. "Morning, Lucien." His heart hammered in terror. What did we do?" He shot upright, grabbing his head. No, this can't." "Maribel, why are you here?" She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "You don't remember? You came home? You said you needed someone. I was drunk. This shouldn't have happened." Maribel let her voice tremble, perfectly rehearsed. "You touched me first, Lucien. What was I supposed to do? Push you away? I'm married." He choked out. "I know," she whispered. Tears pooled in her eyes, tears that weren't real. "But last night, you made me feel like I mattered." Lucien shut his eyes, horrified and guilt-ridden, and that was when Maribel delivered the line Genevieve had drilled into her: "You can't abandon me now. You need to take responsibility for what happened between us." Lucien didn't love Maribel. He didn't even like her, not really, but he saw her vulnerability, or what he thought was vulnerability. Her softness soothed the shame drowning him. Her attention eased the guilt Genevieve had planted. Her admiration fed the insecurity Seraphina never meant to awaken. Piece by piece, Maribel became the voice telling him he was worthy, and in a moment of weakness, Lucien began to believe her. He didn't know it yet, but this was the night that changed the course of all their lives, the night the betrayal truly began. The morning after the trap, Lucien walked through the Kingswell mansion like a man carrying invisible chains. Every step felt heavier, every breath tighter, as though guilt clung to his skin and refused to loosen its grip. He tried to wash the night away, tried to scrub it out of his memory. But no amount of water could erase the image of Maribel waking beside him, acting fragile and broken. By the time he reached the living room, Genevieve was waiting, tea poured, posture perfect, expression unreadable. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. Lucien's throat tightened. "Mother, something happened. Something terrible." Genevieve took a slow sip of tea, hiding her satisfaction. "I know, sweetheart." He froze. "You planned this, didn't you?" She didn't blink. "I didn't force you to do anything. You set me up?" His voice cracked between rage and despair. "I thought it was Seraphina. You let me think, Lucien." She raised her hand, silencing him. "You made a mistake. A human one. But instead of drowning in guilt, you should consider what this means." "I betrayed my wife." Genevieve leaned forward. "No. You were betrayed long before last night. Seraphina chose her empire over you. Over your marriage. Over the family you deserve. Lucien shut his eyes, pain twisting inside him. Genevieve pressed harder, knowing the wound was open. And now there are consequences. Maribel is vulnerable. She is alone. And she believes you care for her. Lucien whispered, I don't. That doesn't matter, Genevieve replied. What matters is that you take responsibility. Her words slid into his ears like cold poison. Responsibility. Duty. Guilt. By the time she was done, the trap had fully closed. Lucien wasn't fighting anymore. He was surrendering. Over the next week, Genevieve pushed and pressed and picked at Lucien's conscience until he finally broke point. One night, he knocked gently on her bedroom door. Mother? I'll do it. She didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. Her voice softened, triumphant. Good. Then we begin. What came next wasn't a single crime, it was a descent. Genevieve instructed him step by step, directing him like a conductor guiding a tragic symphony. First, falsifying financial statements. Lucien justified it to himself as temporary adjustments. Numbers shifted. Funds disappeared. Accounts were quietly rerouted. Second, siphoning money from the hotel under the guise of emergency maintenance. Small amounts at first. Then larger ones. Every lie became easier. Every signature came quicker. Every betrayal felt less like a crime and more like destiny. Third, the paperwork. Genevieve prepared a stack of documents disguised as standard quarterly transfers, forms. Seraphina often signed without question due to her tight schedule. These will move the assets exactly where they need to be. Genevieve explained. Lucien flipped through the pages, swallowing hard. I don't know if she'll sign these. She trusts you, Genevieve reminded him. And she's busy. You know that. Lucien nodded slowly. A man convincing himself that a lie could be mercy, while Genevieve handled logistics. Maribel handled Lucien. She showed up at the mansion more often, sometimes crying, sometimes shy, always perfectly vulnerable. Lucien. I can't stop thinking about what happened, she whispered during one visit. It shouldn't have happened, he replied, turning away, but it did, she said softly. And you were gentle? You were? Kind. Lucien's heart twisted. Maribel had a way of making him feel like the hero in a story where he was actually the villain. She texted him late at night, I hope you got home safe. She held his hand when he looked exhausted. She listened to him, something he didn't even realize he missed, and little by little, she became the comfort to his guilt, the softness to his shame. She made betrayal feel like redemption. Meanwhile, miles away in San Francisco, Seraphina poured her energy into meetings, negotiations, and site visits. But something felt off. Lucien's messages came later than usual. His calls felt shorter, his answers distracted. One evening, she called him after a meeting wrapped early. Hey, love, she said warmly. Lucien hesitated before responding. Oh, Soha. I wasn't expecting your call. You sound tired, she noted. Just a long day, he muttered. Silence stretched, thin and uneasy. Is everything all right? She asked gently. Lucien forced a laugh. Of course. Work is just overwhelming. She closed her eyes. She knew the tone, the evasiveness, the distance. Something was changing. And it wasn't just the miles between them, but Seraphina wasn't the type to accuse without proof. She tucked the worry away, focusing on her project while telling herself everything was fine, but deep inside, she felt the first sting of betrayal long before she saw it. Home, Lucien gathered the documents Genevieve prepared, placing them neatly on his desk. All he needed now was the moment Seraphina returned. A moment when she would be tired, rushed, overwhelmed. A moment when she would sign without reading. Genevieve stood behind him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. You're doing the right thing, she whispered. Lucien didn't answer, but the silence was as good as surrender. 2 months slipped by, 2 months during which Lucien lived between guilt and denial. And Genevieve moved through the house like a queen who finally had the world exactly where she wanted it. Then one morning, everything changed. Maribel arrived at the Kingswell mansion pale, trembling, holding a small white envelope in her hands. Mrs. Kingswell, she whispered, voice cracking just enough to sound fragile. I need to tell you something. Genevieve's heart thudded with anticipation. What is it, dear? Maribel swallowed. I'm pregnant. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. Then Genevieve exhaled a shaky, triumphant laugh, a sound so full of victory it almost didn't sound human. At last, she murmured. At long last. Lucien stood frozen in place, the color draining from his face. Pregnant? He whispered. But how do you know? Maribel opened the envelope, revealing the test results. I thought I should come straight to you. Genevieve clasped her hands together, eyes glistening with satisfaction. This is a blessing. A sign. The Kingswell heir, right here. Maribel lowered her gaze modestly, playing her role perfectly. I wasn't sure if you'd want it. Want it? Genevieve repeated. My dear, this child is our answer to everything. Lucien felt something collapse inside him. The weight of his choices, his weakness, his betrayal, now made flesh, but Genevieve didn't give him time to process. We must celebrate, she declared. The family needs to know immediately. Within a week, invitations were sent to every relative with the Kingswell name. The mansion was decorated with white roses, gold ribbons, and a grand banner stretching across the ballroom. Welcome the first heir of the Kingswell family. The message was clear. Seraphina was no longer part of their story. Guests began to arrive in glittering dresses and tailored suits, buzzing with curiosity and excitement. Laughter filled the hall, champagne flowed, and whispers spread like wildfire. Finally, Lucien will have a proper family. Seraphina was never the right woman for him. The Veil girl only cared about her empire. Well, this one, she looks sweet, doesn't she? Maribel stood at the center of it all, glowing in a cream-colored maternity dress, hands placed gracefully over her stomach. She looked demure, innocent, worshipped by the relatives already imagining the power that child could bring. Lucien stood beside her. Stiff, guilty, lost, yet unable to pull away. That he kept glancing at the front door, as if expecting someone to burst through it. Someone he secretly hoped would never find out. Genevieve noticed and whispered sharply, "Stop looking at the door. She's in San Francisco. She won't be back until next week." Lucien nodded, but his chest tightened. Throughout the room, Seraphina's name floated like a ghost, unwelcome, unwanted, already forgotten. Annette whispered. So it's true? Lucien and Seraphina are finished? Genevieve lifted her champagne glass elegantly. As far as this family is concerned, Seraphina Vale has no place here anymore. The room murmured in agreement. Another cousin leaned close. And the Vale fortune? Will Lucien? Genevieve smiled, a razor hidden in velvet. In due time. Everything is under control. Lucien heard every word. He felt sick, but the music played on, the family toasted, and Maribel basked in the glow of her new status. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as Genevieve had planned, until the ballroom doors swung open with a soft click. The music didn't stop. The chatter didn't stop. But every head turned, slowly, like a wave rolling through the room, because standing at the doorway was a woman none of them expected, Seraphina Vale, her travel coat draped over her shoulders. Suitcase still in hand, hair slightly wind-tossed from the drive, but her posture straight. Her eyes sharp, her presence undeniable. Lucien's breath caught in his throat. Maribel's smile vanished. Genevieve's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. The room fell silent. Seraphina took in the scene, the decorations, the banner, the champagne, the woman standing next to her husband with a pregnant belly displayed like a prize. Her jaw tightened. But her expression remained calm, too calm. She stepped forward slowly, her heels echoing across the marble floor. Well, she said softly, a mocking sweetness coating her voice. I see I missed quite the celebration. Her eyes locked on Lucien's. He looked away, then she smiled, not with kindness, not with sorrow, but with a cold, quiet fury that made the entire room shiver. Don't stop on my account, she added. I'd hate to ruin such an important occasion. Everyone realized in that moment, the storm had arrived, and none of them were prepared for what was coming. Silence clung to the ballroom like a suffocating fog. The moment Seraphina Vale stepped inside, the very air shifted, as if the house itself knew the rightful owner had returned. Her suitcase wheels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each sound slicing through the tension, announcing her presence with an authority no one could ignore. Lucien swallowed hard. Maribel froze. Genevieve felt her throat tighten, and Seraphina? She stood tall, her expression unreadable, calm, collected, but with a storm simmering behind her eyes. A storm that was about to break. She let her gaze move slowly across the room. From the banner declaring the Kingswell heir, to the champagne glasses raised in celebration, to the woman standing proudly beside her husband with his hand hovering awkwardly near her pregnant belly. Then Seraphina tilted her head and smiled. Quite the party, she said softly. I hope I'm not interrupting. The words were polite. The tone was deadly. Maribel clutched Lucien's arm. Lucien stepped back as if burned. Genevieve was the first to recover. Her voice rang out sharp and commanding. Why are you here, Seraphina? This is a family gathering. Seraphina raised an eyebrow. Oh? I wasn't aware I had been removed from the definition. A ripple of whispers spread through the guests. Genevieve stepped forward, chin lifted high in arrogance. You shouldn't be here. In fact. Her lips curled into a cruel smile. You no longer have any place in this house. Seraphina stared at her, unmoving. Genevieve continued, louder, ensuring every eye, and every camera, was on her. All the assets under your name have already been transferred to Lucien. This house, she gestured dramatically, belongs to him. And soon, so will the heir this family deserves. Gasps filled the room. Lucien whispered, horrified, Mother. Don't, but it was too late. Genevieve had declared war in front of everyone. She leaned close, sneering, so please do the decent thing. And leave. For a heartbeat, Seraphina didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe, then she laughed, not loudly. Not hysterically. But with a quiet, razor-sharp amusement that chilled everyone to the bone. It wasn't the laugh of a woman defeated. It was the laugh of someone who had already won. Genevieve, she said, wiping an invisible tear at the corner of her eye. You truly think you're dangerous, don't you? The older woman stiffened. Don't speak to me like, oh please, Seraphina interrupted gently. Stop embarrassing yourself. Her tone was soft, but the insult landed like a slap. The guests held their breath. Genevieve's face flushed red. How dare you? How dare you, Seraphina said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. How dare you think I wouldn't know what happens in my own home? Lucien felt his stomach drop. Seraphina straightened her posture, her voice rising enough for everyone to hear. You think I didn't know about the whispered conversations? The secret meetings? The documents you thought you could slip in among routine paperwork? Her eyes swept across Lucien, Genevieve, and finally Maribel. You thought every betrayal you committed stayed hidden. She took another step. Now she stood inches from Genevieve. But let me clarify something. She lowered her voice. This is my house. My father's estate. My team installed the security. And this home, every hallway, every corner, has multiple hidden cameras. The room exploded in murmurs. Genevieve's confident stance faltered. Lucien's breath caught. Painfully, Maribel clutched her stomach like she needed protection. Seraphina let the weight of her words settle before continuing. And everything that happened here. She glanced at each of them. I've known for weeks. Lucien finally stepped forward, trembling. As Seraphina? I can explain. She lifted a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. No, Lucien. For once in your life, don't explain. Just listen. His shoulders collapsed. Seraphina's voice softened, not with affection, but with finality. You lied to me. You betrayed our vows. Our life. Her gaze flicked briefly to Maribel's stomach. And you created a future with someone else. Lucien shook his head violently. I didn't mean to, I was tricked, I thought. You thought I wouldn't find out, she finished flatly. Genevieve tried to regain control, her voice shrill. You have no proof. Nothing you claim, but Seraphina's smile cut her off. Oh Genevieve? When did I say I came here empty-handed? A tall man in a black suit stepped into the room. Her family's attorney. Gasps echoed. Genevieve's face drained of color. You brought a lawyer? Seraphina shrugged lightly. I figured I might need one. You know? Since this is apparently a life-changing evening. The attorney handed her a tablet. Seraphina tapped the screen, and the ballroom projector flickered to life, and there they were. Clips of Genevieve coaching Maribel, recordings of Maribel slipping into the mansion. Lucien falsifying reports of conversations discussing, taking everything. Genevieve's voice clearly stating, once we get her signature, she'll have nothing left. The room erupted into chaos. Guests gasped. Relatives stared in horror. Maribel nearly fainted. Lucien collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. And Genevieve? She stumbled backward as though physically struck. Seraphina watched them unravel, calm, steady, unbroken. Then she said quietly, now. Shall we continue your celebration? Her voice sliced through the panic, sharp as justice, because the reckoning had only begun. The ballroom projector hummed, casting a pale glow over the stunned crowd. Seraphina stood in the center of the chaos she hadn't created, but would finish. Behind her, the massive screen flickered to life. Genevieve instinctively stepped back, whispering, no? No, turn that off, turn it off now. Seraphina didn't look at her. Everyone, she said calmly. Please watch closely. The screen displayed a hidden camera angle from Genevieve's private sitting room. Genevieve's voice filled the entire ballroom. Wear her perfume. Wear her clothes. When he's drunk, he won't know the difference. Gasps erupted around the room. Maribel's face turned chalk-white. Lucien flinched as though he'd been struck. The video continued, Genevieve pacing like a general plotting war. Maribel nodding obediently, rehearsing flirtatious gestures. Practicing how to mimic Seraphina's silhouette in low light. I want her out, Genevieve hissed in the video. And once the baby is born, Lucien will have everything he needs. Guests covered their mouths. Someone whispered, my God. She planned the affair. Genevieve lunged toward the projector, but two Veil Group security guards stepped forward, blocking her path. This is defamation. She screamed. Lies. All lies. But her own voice kept playing behind her. The next clip showed Maribel in Seraphina's dressing room, wearing the exact silk nightgown Lucien mistook for his wife. Maribel twirled in the mirror, laughing softly as Genevieve adjusted the straps. Perfect, Genevieve said. He'll never suspect. The room burst into horrified murmurs. Maribel hugged her stomach, trembling. I didn't want. Seraphina's cold gaze silenced her. You wanted everything, Maribel. You just didn't think I would be watching. The final clip hit like a thunderclap. Genevieve and Lucien sat in the study late at night. Stacks of documents around them. Genevieve's voice was crystal clear. Once she signs these, the Veil assets will shift under your name. After that, she'll have nothing. Lucien's own voice responded, shaken but audible, I just hope she doesn't read them. That was enough to destroy reputations. Enough to end a family. The moment the video ended, the entire room erupted into outrage. Unbelievable. They tried to steal her company. Is this even legal? The Kingswells are finished. Genevieve's face twisted with panic. Lucien sank into a chair, shaking uncontrollably. Maribel sobbed into her hands, and Seraphina? She remained standing, poised, emotionless, because the reckoning was only beginning. Her family attorney, Mr. Aldridge, stepped forward with a thick folder in his hands. Veil security flanked him, imposing in black suits. Mrs. Veil, he said clearly, we're ready. Lucien looked up, voice barely working. Sarah, what is this? She didn't answer him. Mr. Aldridge opened the folder. The projector switched to financial spreadsheets and bank statements. Mr. Aldridge narrated, over the past 2 months, Mr. Lucien Kingswell altered financial records and diverted hotel funds into private accounts. He zoomed in on the signatures. Here are the forged approvals. Here are the siphoned amounts. And here is the time-stamped evidence confirming he manipulated Veil Group systems using unauthorized credentials. Lucien didn't breathe. The relatives stared at him like he was a stranger. I didn't mean. I didn't know, but the evidence was damning. The attorney lifted another stack of documents. These are the transfer papers. Mr. Kingswell attempted to have Mrs. Veil sign. Gasps spread again. He continued, however, these documents have no legal effect. All major Veil family assets were transferred to Mr. Alexander Veil years ago. Anything Mrs. Veil signs affects nothing. Genevieve staggered. What? That's impossible. Seraphina finally spoke, voice soft but sharp. It's called a prenuptial restructuring. My father insisted on it. She looked directly at Genevieve. You never had access to my fortune. Not for a single moment. The older woman looked like the ground disappeared beneath her feet. Mr. Aldridge pulled out one last item. A USB drive. This contains the full recordings of Mrs. Genevieve Kingswell conspiring to defraud the Veil family and orchestrating the seduction of Mr. Kingswell. Genevieve's knees buckled. And she sank into a chair. Please, please? I beg you. But Seraphina's expression didn't soften. You weren't begging when you tried to destroy my life. The room quieted as Seraphina stepped forward. She looked at each of them. At the woman who despised her, the man who betrayed her, the mistress who played the victim, the relatives who celebrated her downfall. Then she said the words that would follow them for the rest of their lives. From beginning to end, I was the only one in control. Everything you did, every lie you told, you acted them out in a house that belongs to me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Seraphina exhaled slowly, letting the weight of her words settle, and now, she added softly, you may continue your little celebration, if you can. Her heels clicked as she turned away. In the corner, Genevieve collapsed fully into her chair. Hands shaking violently, Maribel cried uncontrollably. Mascara streaking down her cheeks. Lucien stared at the floor, unable to speak, unable to breathe, unable to undo the ruin he helped create. The once proud Kingswell family lay in ashes, exposed, disgraced, and destroyed in a single unforgettable night, and Seraphina Veil walked out of the ballroom not as a victim, but as the woman who reclaimed everything that was rightfully hers. The room had barely recovered from the shock of Seraphina's revelation when the night shifted again, like the air itself realized the Kingswells were no longer untouchable. Conversations died, glasses stilled, and the once lavish ballroom felt suddenly cold, and that was when the consequences began. Lucien stood frozen in the center of the room, the projector still flickering behind him like a spotlight on his downfall. His face, usually composed, confident, had drained of color. He looked less like the heir of a hotel empire and more like a man watching the world collapse under his feet. Whispers erupted around him. Forgery? Financial manipulation? He lied on the audits. Every word hit him like a blow. Then the Veil Group attorney stepped forward, his tone calm but merciless. Mr. Kingswell, Veil Group has officially submitted charges for falsifying financial reports, misappropriating hotel funds, and abusing your executive authority. Lucien shook his head violently, as if denial could rewrite reality. No, that's impossible. This is a misunderstanding. It's fully documented, the attorney continued. And your position at Kingswell Hotels has been suspended effective immediately. Gasps echoed around them. Lucien's knees almost buckled. Suspended. Publicly. In front of family, investors, and social elites, and then came the final blow. Your shares, categorized as technical holdings with no actual equity value, are also being withdrawn. The truth behind the illusion he clung to for years finally surfaced. He had never truly owned anything. He had only been allowed to pretend. He turned toward Seraphina, desperation flooding his voice. Seraphina, please. Please look at me. I never meant. She walked past him without a single glance. To her, he was a stranger now, his hand lifted helplessly in the air, reaching for redemption that would never come. Seraphina? I'm sorry, he whispered, voice cracking, but she didn't stop, and that silence crushed him more thoroughly than any lawsuit ever could. Maribel stood a few feet away, trembling. A few minutes earlier, she had imagined herself on the brink of joining a wealthy, powerful family. Now she realized she had tied her future to a man who had just lost everything. She clutched the hem of her dress. So, what does that mean for me? She asked Lucien, voice small, frightened. He didn't answer. He couldn't. A wave of murmurs swept through the guests, judgment, ridicule, pity, disdain. Maribel felt every one of them like needles in her skin. Then Genevieve's voice cut through the air like a blade. This woman, she announced, pointing an accusing finger, is not part of our family. She never has been. And she never will be. Maribel felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Mrs. Kingswell, please, I didn't know about. Enough, Genevieve snapped. You knew exactly what you were doing. You thought seducing my son would make you one of us? Pathetic. Her humiliation was complete, and public point two security guards approached. Miss, we need you to leave the property. Maribel's breath caught. Leave? I have nowhere to, but her words faded as the guards escorted her out of the glittering ballroom, out of the Kingswell estate. Out of the future she had clung to. She left with no title, no money, no acceptance, only despair. A perfect seed for a new storm yet to come. For years, Genevieve Kingswell had worn the mask of a benevolent matriarch, philanthropist, charity organizer, champion of the elite women's circle. That mask was burning now. The videos shown earlier, the plotting, the greed, the manipulation, spread through the room like wildfire. Every woman she had once commanded with icy elegance now stared at her in disgust. Is this who she truly is? She blackmailed her own daughter-in-law? What a disgrace. Two members of the prestigious Women of Prosperity Association stepped forward. Genevieve, one said coldly. Your position in the organization is suspended pending review. You can't do that. Genevieve shrieked. I built that association. I shaped it. But no one listened. Her husband stepped away from her. Her friends avoided her gaze. Her empire of social influence collapsed in minutes. No. Don't turn your backs on me. I am Genevieve Kingswell. But the world she ruled no longer existed, while the family crumbled emotionally. The corporate destruction followed swiftly. The Vale Group legal team sent secured files to federal authorities. Every fraudulent number, every illegal transaction Lucien had orchestrated, every strategic manipulation Genevieve had supported. Within hours, the company's financial department was notified of a mandatory audit. Several investors began withdrawing. Two partners terminated their contracts immediately. Rumors of bankruptcy whispered through the upper circles like a cold draft. The Kingswell empire had been built on power, image, and fear. But once the facade cracked, everything rotted beneath it was laid bare, and the collapse had only begun when the crowd had thinned and the Kingswell's world lay in ruins. The Vale Group attorney approached Seraphina with the final confirmation. The forced transfer document they made you sign, he said, has officially been deemed invalid. Your assets remain fully under your control. Seraphina exhaled slowly, a breath she had held for far too long. The Vale Group would protect her. Her businesses were safe. Her future was hers again. Even the Kingswell mansion, the symbol of their power, was now under investigation. Cleared for seizure if financial crimes were confirmed, meaning the Kingswells would soon lose even their home. Seraphina walked toward the grand entrance. The night breeze touched her face as she stepped outside, leaving the mansion behind. No tears. No hesitation. No regret. She had fought her way through betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation, and emerged standing taller than ever. The Kingswells had tried to take everything from her. In the end, they only lost themselves. And Seraphina? She walked into the darkness with her head high, the quiet promise of a new beginning shining in her eyes. A woman reborn. The Kingswell mansion faded behind her like a chapter finally burned shut. But the world outside was already waiting, brighter, louder, and ready for the woman who had survived the storm. This was where her rebirth began. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Seraphina returned to Vale Group headquarters, not as the CEO's daughter, not as the quiet heiress managing a single division, but as the woman who had faced betrayal and walked out undefeated. Her first day back, the entire board rose when she entered the room. It wasn't politeness. It was respect. She took the lead on the company's largest expansion. A global F&B project that would place the Vale name among the most influential luxury brands in the world. Reporters flooded business magazines with headlines. Seraphina Vale, the Iron Heiress of the FNB Empire. From scandal to power, how Seraphina rewrote her own destiny. And for the first time in a long time, Seraphina allowed herself to breathe. To exist. To grow. She had always been strong. But now, she was unshakable. Lucien showed up 2 days after the scandal broke, pale. Sleepless, a shadow of the man she once loved. He waited in the lobby of Vale Group for hours until she finally stepped out of the elevator. Seraphina? Please. Just hear me out. People turned to stare, but Seraphina kept her voice calm. What do you want, Lucien? He swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. I know I ruined everything. I know I don't deserve another chance. But, can we try again? Just start over? For a moment, there was silence, heavy, thick, almost suffocating. Then Seraphina looked at him with a mixture of sadness and clarity. Lucien, she said softly. I already did start over. His eyes brightened with fragile hope. She continued. But not with you. The hope shattered instantly. Lucien's voice cracked. Seraphina, I love you. No, she interrupted gently. You loved the version of me who trusted blindly. That woman is gone. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He reached for her hand, she stepped away, and then she walked past him, steady, determined, without looking back even once. The fall of the Kingswell family was swift and merciless. Financial audits exposed years of mismanagement. Accounts were frozen. Their properties were seized for investigation. Most of their assets evaporated overnight. The woman who once ruled charity galas with a single nod now lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. Genevieve wrote Seraphina a long letter, pages of apologies. Excuses, please, but Seraphina never opened it. She simply instructed her assistant, return it unread. Genevieve received the envelope back days later. Untouched, she broke down crying in the hallway of her new building. Realizing too late that the woman she once tried to crush had never needed revenge, her absence alone was enough. As for Maribel. She vanished, clients dropped her instantly. Friends unfollowed her. Tabloids labeled her, gold digger who backed the wrong man. She fled the city quietly, belly showing, future uncertain. No one invited her to events anymore. No one whispered her name at elegant brunches. She became nothing more than a cautionary tale. A reminder that ambition without integrity always has an expiration date. Seraphina's rebirth didn't come from revenge. It came from peace. She devoted herself to her mental health, to rebuilding the parts of her heart that had been bruised. She took morning walks. She returned to painting, something she hadn't done since childhood. She slept without fear or loneliness clinging to her thoughts. At Vale Group, she finalized plans for a new international hotel and restaurant chain, one that would carry her signature vision. Her team believed in her. Her father trusted her. And Seraphina trusted herself. One evening, after a long strategy meeting, she stood on the rooftop of Vale Tower. The city glittered beneath her, alive, vibrant, unstoppable, just like her. The wind carried her hair, cool and freeing, as she whispered to herself, I survived. And then louder, steadier, I won. Her reflection in the glass window looked different. Sharper. Brighter. Stronger than ever. The past had tried to break her. Instead, it carved her into someone powerful. She turned toward the city lights with a peaceful smile. In a world full of schemes, she murmured, you don't always need to fight with strength. Sometimes, you only need to stand up. And let the truth handle the rest. And with that, Seraphina Vale stepped forward into a future that finally belonged entirely to her. A woman reborn. A legacy reclaimed. A new story just beginning.